What's John Sleeting's style?
Oh, goodness. You probably need to talk to somebody else to figure out what my style is, right? So
you're helping make an impact in the world just by being the connector, right?
Who'd have thunk that I'd have been doing what I'm continuing on and how we communicate the stories that we do through our podcast and now have 26. We started out with 6. We'll go good in order to have best.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, that's the intentionality. It's true in business, it's true in your family, it's true with your kids, it's true with interactions. It's just true across the board. You have to bring intentionality. The question for everyone is, what do you want to be intentional about?
The Love Local Chicagoland Podcast is made possible with the generous support of our community partners. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on, friends? Welcome back to another episode of the Love Local Chicagoland Podcast. My name is Jason Stallard, the host of the Love Local Chicagoland Podcast, and I got a special treat for you today. To me, we're leveling up and we're bringing in other podcasters in here that are really, really good at their craft, and I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of intimidated by my guest today because he is, from the get-go, I saw that he had a love and a passion for stories. And to me, I think that's why I'm here. I love stories. I think stories could help us. I think they could help shape today. I think they could shape tomorrow if we look at the commonalities within our stories. So I'm going to introduce you here in a moment to John Sleeting. He's with Clearwater Capital as a partner, and he helps you with your wealth management. He has a wonderful story. In addition to being a podcaster, he works full-time at Clearwater Capital, where he helps people build wealth. And what I love about him is there's a stewardship that comes along with being able to do that, because it's all about setting up tomorrow. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about all that stuff, but we're really going to get into who he is as a human and what drives him and some of his story. So enough of me talking. Let me introduce you to John Sleeting, a wealth manager, partner with Clearwater Capital, a family man, and I'm excited to introduce you. John Sleeting, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and your words are too kind. And I've never considered myself a podcaster, right? So you've turned me into that, and we'll explore a little bit more of what that means, what that looks like for me, the thought process that comes behind that, and what you and your team have actually empowered us to be able to do to amplify our own voice with the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Thank you for Royal Family Real Estate for sponsoring this episode as well.
Cheers.
And being here and being able to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Royal Family for sure. They're Royal Hartwig, really good man, really strong businessman here in our local community. And he's really doing some remarkable things with his brokerage. And I'll be willing to bet you'll see Royal Family everywhere as we continue to evolve. But definitely shout out to them for sponsoring the show today. It means a lot. So, getting ready for this interview, I was like, man, I interview people. I haven't interviewed somebody else that actually puts the interview together. So I was like, what do people need to know about John Sleeting? And sometimes when people think, a wealth manager, they don't know that person could always be like really personable, really come from the heart, really want what's right for people. And we've seen you in the studio now for about 18 months. And man, you're one heck of a storyteller with the art of the conversation that you bring out. And you're really good at your job, obviously, because you've been doing it for 16 years, so they're keeping you around for a reason, which I'm guessing is good. But your journey's been incredible, So I would love to hear about your journey through entrepreneurship, about your life, and kind of what's led you to now, and just give us a high-level overview.
Yeah, it's a strange path, circuitous at best. Never thought I'd be have the opportunity to do what I'm doing now. Yeah. So if we rewind a little bit, and I'll try to keep the backstory as tight as possible. But my wife and I did grow up in the northwest suburbs here of Chicago. We met in high school. Actually, we just passed over 40 years ago that we met.
That's awesome.
So the time together, celebrating our 35th wedding anniversary coming up. So we met in high school.
Happy
dating through high school. Thank
early,
you. I went to school out on the East Coast to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, while she went to the American Academy of Art here in Chicago. 4 years later, 10 days after graduation, we were married, and we moved to Michigan, northern Michigan. So coming out of the Coast Guard Academy, although the technical major from an academic viewpoint was management, the military operational viewpoint brought me to a ship on the Great Lakes. whereas the operations officer for a couple years there.
So you're close to home then too, as you serve.
Close to home is one of the selections of why we wanted to be here. Being newly married, she growing up in Chicago, going to art school here in Chicago. This was home, so we're close to family, right? Family is really important, and I know we'll hit on that as part of the overall discussion. When we looked at it, because of the importance of family and ships, even on the Great Lakes, we would be in and out and time away from home. And we thought, someday when we start a family, this was going to be a tough way for us to raise children. So have such a soft spot. My son served in the Marine Corps. My son-in-law is in the Coast Guard right now. We've had military all through our family in various ways. And it's sacrifice, not just for the individual that could be serving or giving the ultimate sacrifice, but also the families that are alongside them. And when we step back, we're like, when we have children, this is a hard life, and it is a very hard life. I got orders to Coast Guard headquarters. I worked in engineering planning. So you think about the budgeting and planning for the ships and for the aircraft and for research and development and civil plant. Did that for a couple years. Then I went to the University of Maryland, received my MBA. Then Coast Guard headquarters is close by, Washington, D.C., coming out of University of Maryland. They said, come on back and co-manage the operating budget for the Coast Guard. So that's dealing between Congress and the fleet with respect to appropriations and authorizations and how funds in the process works in Washington. So a lot of people would say 5 years in Washington, D.C. is a long time in dog years, and the experience was fantastic. All three of our children were born, so twin daughters and a son, born at the Bethesda National Naval Medical Center, now Walter Reed, as the entities got combined. But we, 7 years, just over 7 years, we came back to the Chicago area. Time and service was up, fulfilled our commitment, and then went to GE Capital. So looking to translate, the financial understanding, the math, and at this point in time, GE Capital was really getting deep into Six Sigma methodologies.
Sure.
So went to GE Capital, was there for 4.5 years. They kept wanting me to move. I kept saying no. So I went over to Motorola here locally, staying in the Chicago area, but traveling international. I spent quite a bit of time between Europe, but also in Asia, and in particular, it was probably 1 week a month over in Seoul, South Korea, but to Hong Kong, Beijing, Singapore, spending a lot of time traveling and bringing that in, but we could raise our family locally and be tied into our church and our community and close to family.
Yeah, which is so important.
It is. And then GE. So one of the decisions we made early on in our marriage was that we're not going to do the moving around. We did it early on, even within the Coast Guard, but we weren't going to chase jobs and money to be moving all over the place.
Smart.
Because what's most important, and most important for us was being here, being local, being near family, raising the kids, being close to aunts and uncles, all of that kind of gets folded into it.
When you're in a community of your family, like life's, to me, it's just better. I've kind of done them both, and life's better when you have a community of people around you that love you, that care for you, that you could support each other, especially when you guys were young in your marriage with you had twins and a son. That's a lot to handle. To have family around is super beneficial. Yeah,
it absolutely is. At all ages and all stages.
Yeah, definitely.
And friends, people that know you for who you are from middle school, from high school, on, and still maintaining some of those relationships to this very day.
Yeah, it's key.
So then when GE Capital bought Heller Finance in Chicago, they said, well, come on back, and invited me back to lead the pricing capital allocation strategy and the healthcare finance vertical. I took over the syndicated loan operation for GE Capital. So now this is in the early 2000s from Motorola to GE. Then when the financial crisis was coming on back in 2008 and 9, GE had said, "Hey, you know what? Do what you did within the healthcare finance business, but do it on a Pan-American basis. Move to Connecticut." It was kind of like, well, we made our decision. We put those stakes in the ground early on, but pretty significant financial crisis. Now, Melissa, our family was being served by Clearwater Capital back then. We became clients in 2007 of Clearwater Capital. Awesome. So in 2008, when I'm starting in all these discussions, whether I commute to Connecticut or we're not moving, or how does that play out, especially with the kids at their age then. And John Chapman, our founding partner and CEO, had asked me then, as I was a client, and he's like, have you ever considered this side of the financial world? And I'm like, no, why would I ever want to do that, right? So a little bit of I think, the sign on the table here that we have in front of us is, stay humble.
Yes.
And I'd say, my ego probably got in the way a little bit of going, well, I mean, everyone knew who GE Capital was back, back in the day. People didn't know who Clearwater Capital was. But then for the same reason I wanted my family cared for, at a high technically competent, but by people I could trust and had integrity and had high character, if we could bring those things together, and that's why I wanted to be a client, and we can go build a firm that serves people like that, then that's what I want to strive to do every day. And so now you go back to your 16 years ago. The last 16 years has been fantastic. So that's a little bit of the backstory that brings us into where we're at today.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Let me dive into some of the things that curiosity came over me as you were talking. You talked about coming from a family of military. Military, to me, I came from a family of military. I couldn't join because I have something called bicuspid aortic valve defect, so they wouldn't let me go in for that. But there is I know this from my family, there's a sense of honor, there's a sense of pride, and you learn a lot of valuable things by being in the military that, to me, could make you a better human in some aspects. I heard a little bit of why you got in, but what do you think the values you took out of that, that experience that helped shape you today?
Yeah, so having the military influence broadly growing up. When I say that, my mom's brother, my uncle, was killed in action in Vietnam. My wife's father was in the Army serving in Korean War. Her older brother was also Marines. I have an older cousin that graduated from the Coast Guard Academy back in the mid-'60s. My grandfather served in the Coast Guard in World War II. So we had on both sides of the family, the influence, the visibility, and that image of service above self, and how we all have a responsibility to serve and to give back. We live in a phenomenal country. The opportunities that are there, every place has challenges, but I'll take our challenges over some challenges elsewhere in the world, and to be able to serve and to give back and to do that in a way. Now, personally for me, I looked at the Coast Guard in particular from other services, and I saw the peacetime mission in addition to the wartime mission, so that no matter whether we were at peace or war, there's work to be done, so to speak, versus being in a organization that's solely focused on being prepared for war or strength as a defense into its own right. So I looked at that, and that's why I chose to go the path of Coast Guard. So going through the Coast Guard Academy, military academy, similar to Annapolis, West Point, Air Force. The reason I say similar is those service academies are all done through political appointments that are required, where the Coast Guard's all merit-based. So with a bit of pride, I'd say the Coast Guard Academy is actually the most difficult to get into and challenging. It's about 1/4 the size of the other academies. You can drop the mic.
It's all right.
So exactly.
There's a sense of pride right there. I get it.
We cut politics out of it. It's like, let's just get to trying to get to the best of the best, right? And so why they accepted me then in the search of the best, I leave that to history to judge. But it was a great experience in leadership, in discipline. Not that I lack that growing up from what you get from sports and activities or from academics, but really then bringing that in. Now, some people would say that could be good and bad, right? I mean, don't want to be too militaristic, right, and overly disciplined. And this gets into that hard head for people and hard head for business and soft heart for people. Is you don't want to be so hard-headed where everything is disciplined and is the militaristic piece of it. And you want to have that soft heart for people. And yet it can't, in my mind, in my opinion, right, if everything is so relational is really important, right? So soft, really important. But you can't do the heavy lifting and the technical competence and the discipline regarding whatever it is that you're doing. You have to deliver to the people that you're serving. No matter what it is, right? No matter what kind of business you're in, you have to be able to deliver technically in what that is, and also be able to do it relationally, where you're connecting at that heart level for people, because ultimately people in their life's journey, right, is a human experience, and in various ways you're providing a lot of different services that you have to do really well. So I think these things go together, and I do not believe that they're mutually exclusive. And I see that through my military experience as well. Yeah,
I feel like that's when, if you always have a hard head, you're going to lose. You're going to upset people. You're going to not listen to good ideas. You're not going to be able to grow, right? And
I'm guilty of that at times. I'm guilty of that at times.
You have to push, right? Especially as a business owner. And in today's world, like, you have to change, you have to pivot, you have to adapt, and you have to go quick. And those are sometimes hard things to be able to do, right? Yeah. But to me, it's I feel like if I had to look at my leadership style over the years, I used to be a lot harder head, and I didn't bring in the heart until later in life. But when you bring them both together, and you could hold somebody accountable at a high level, you could have a relationship with them, and vice versa, and you're going to stick to what makes business make sense. But if you also care about the human, you want them to do what's best for them so they live a joyous human experience, like, life's just better, right? At least from my experience. You talked about service above self, and that's throughout this, John. I mean, I feel like what us men, many of us should shoot to strive for when it comes to, like, I need to be a good man, and I need to be able to provide for my family, but I want to build something that's impactful. I want to help other people too. I think leading service from a service aspect makes for a better life too. Goes back to your quote that you said. So I think my thoughts for you is, like, where you had it instilled in you, you got some of that serviceness from the military, but where else does that come from? And I know when we talked, I'll give you a hint, like, where to go with it is just your faith. Like, that seems like it's the foundation of everything that you do.
Yeah, and for me it is. Yeah. For me it is foundational. And if anyone can really get to the core of their belief system, and then try to live that way, doesn't mean you're perfect with it. Everyone knows that I'm not perfect with saying the whole practice what you preach, right? Yeah. And am I preaching? I'm preaching to myself, right? This is the foundation. This is what I believe. Now, do I live up to that all the time? No, no one can, and no one does. And however, how do you pursue that, right? How do you pursue that? For us as Christians, we look at that in terms of our church and what are we learning from our church, community, friends, studies, going through. What does our belief system actually say regarding how we're supposed to live it out? And then how do we attempt to, imperfectly, live that out and what that can look like? The core of everything I do, which is motivating and drives the purpose behind what I have the opportunity to do, is extremely important. And then how do you build from there? Without that strong foundation, it feels like you're constantly grasping for the wind, or there's the risk of doing that, right, too, in terms of what that means. So, aligning your belief system with how you live it out is really important. Yeah,
I feel like faith helps you kind of stay accountable, too. So when you do go outside of it, you're like, gotta come back, Humble is a piece of it, right? Yeah. Offering ourselves that grace as we go through that. Yeah. That's key, too.
And people in your lives, too, right? I mean, family members feeling like, hey, my kids call me on it all the time, right? I mean, I learn from them because they'll see, right? My kids see, my wife Melissa sees, before anybody else in terms of the imperfections of going, well, you're not doing what you said you wanted to be.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah, exactly. It's
that's what they're there for.
And that humility piece of it, and striving for that and being open. Again, not all the time, right? Certain things it's like, I don't want to hear this right now.
For sure.
But also in the office space with clients and relationships and having people around you that can speak that truth into you. Because I do want to be what I say, even though sometimes I don't live that out.
Yeah, no, and I think that's all of us, right? At the end of the day, it's, we none of us are perfect. I think that's the idea why I have an operating system, and faith, because you have a place to go to look at, like, well, what is truth? Maybe it is me. Maybe it is my ego in the way, or maybe it is that. But to be able to be humble, to be able to take that feedback from your wife, maybe not right then, it's just, especially after you've been married as long as you guys have, but I'm sure it comes. It's important, and to me, you talked and so prideful about your family. I interview a lot of people, and not everybody puts their family at the forefront, but like that's what you lit up on our call when you talked about them. And I come back to, like, man, what was it like to be? Maybe this is the next podcast with your kids. We'll give a listen first. But growing up with a dad that had like a mentality of faith based, but then has a mindset of have a hard head for business and a soft heart for people. I wonder what that would have been like, right? We'll save that for another show. You don't have to answer that, but talk to us a little bit about your family and kind of how they're very much a grounding force for you as well.
They are, and I mean, as parents, again, for Melissa and I, some of the stakes that we put into the ground was the not moving around and chasing money and jobs. Other ones were really for our kids. The two girls, our twin daughters, and then our son, that grew up to be strong, independent, ability to operate in the world no matter what. Because we're not going to be here forever, right? So how do you raise kids? Our kids are not our friends, and so how do you parent? And again, there's all kinds of books out there, right? And sometimes as a parent, you're figuring it out as you go, and you're making it up as you go.
It's called winging it.
There's some of that, which also goes back then to your belief system, right? Which goes back then in terms of others around you and how you approach that, and also being on the same page as parents, being like, here are the stakes in the ground, and some of that for the kids, for us, was focus in terms of education, and education isn't everything, and for everyone in some ways, we can touch on that a little bit more, but education was really important to us, but not just textbook education, also in terms of travel experiences. The being outside of your comfort zone, so to speak, the moving beyond the being local. Although we wanted to be back in the Chicago area near family, I did a lot of traveling, as I mentioned, globally, and the kids absolutely following suit through college years. Beyond, we've got one daughter and grandkids that live over in England now. Awesome. Our other daughter and her family and grandkids, they live in Washington D.C. Our son's out in Montana. And the kids are constantly traveling and staying in contact with one another, visiting one another. I mean, the kids flying to each other and spending time together without us, where mom and dad are not the convening authority of the family. Yes, we get together at holidays and periodically, but they're also doing it on their own, in communication and the relationships between our son-in-laws and our biological son, right? I mean, that's the relationships that are there. It is normal. So there's a lot of pride that I have in our children, our grandchildren, the people that they are, how they look at themselves in their own communities, and also their view and understanding through education, both academic, but also the education of just putting yourself out there and learning and living around the world too. Yeah,
I think it's key. It goes back to like starting at home, and it's. You talk a lot about stewardship in conversations that you have with other entrepreneurs, and I, making sure that we set tomorrow up is really important. The Bible well, like generations come, generations go. They won't remember past generations just like we don't remember past generations. But the importance of stewarding those types of beliefs in our families and showing like. You didn't have them go chase money. You had them chase experiences. Right. You showed them different cultures by setting those things up. Yeah. And, education, it isn't for everybody, you're right. But I feel like it's for many. And to be able to learn and to grow, whether it's, if it's college, whether it's whatever it is, but to learn is really, really important so that they could steward the next generation, and pass on what you gave them to be able to carry it on to the next. So where's that stewardship piece? Is that something that was instilled in you too, or did that come later in life? Because I hear you, that is one of your buzzwords, John.
So I'm glad because it really is important to me. But then some people misinterpret stewardship, or they only take stewardship and they think about the concept of financial means and the management, right? To steward something is to manage something, and how do you manage that well? But I think all too often people default to financial and financial capital and how you steward and manage that. Has to be done really well. Yeah. But the financial capital and how wealth gets created, and this is what I've strive to bringing on the stories within the podcast series that I do on Clear Conversations called Entrepreneurial Legacies, and the learnings that I'm taking back, because we're all learning, how do you do this well? And from those conversations comes impact is an output. Financial capital is an output, right? People aren't born as entrepreneurs, right? They have to go create. How do you go create? you have to actually focus back first on the intellectual capital and the human capital. It's why the intellectual capital comes from academics, learning. And when I say academics, I'm not just talking about book smarts, right? As you've heard from many of the guests that we've had, some of them didn't finish high school, didn't finish college, didn't finish, right? And so it's not just an academic, but it's learning and taking in experiences, putting yourself outside the comfort zone. For listeners that are thinking, well, yeah, I can't, afford my kids traveling all over the world. It's like, well, it doesn't have to be. My point is saying get out of your comfort zone and make sure that you're having conversations. You're learning people's stories, even if that means it's your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Even if it means somebody in your own town and village, or here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, does that mean getting downtown into the city and experiencing things with people that aren't normal? Focus on the intellectual and human capital development for our kids, for our families, for ourselves, right? What are we still learning? How are we developing and focusing on spending our time, our human capital, to learn, developing our intellectual capital, to use our time to give back in various ways. And it's your time that you're trading for money effectively, right? So it's the human capital in terms of somebody seeing value in what you're doing and saying, yeah, I'm willing to pay for that. That creates the financial capital. Then the financial capital becomes the output. But you have to have intentionality regarding the intellectual development, the human capital development, being discerning of what your calendar, who's on your calendar, what time, where are things life-giving to you versus things that are life-taking. Take the things that are life-taking, get them off your calendar. Cancel things, say no to things. It's not all is good. And if you're not doing that, then you're not actually managing your time. And that, in my mind, is stewardship as well. So it's human capital, intellectual capital, financial capital. That also empowers you then to do social capital type activities, philanthropic activities. We can talk more about that if you want to.
Yeah, we'll dive that in a little bit, and definitely talk about the importance of giving back and just some of your history with that and what you're currently doing. To me, the human capital is like the foundation of it. You can make as much money as you want, but if you're not a good person, you're probably not going to keep it long, right? Or it's not going to be able to carry from generation to generation because you're not going to, instill good habits with your kids. I don't know the story. I'm just seeing what could happen, right? But to me, you put it eloquently because it does come from many ways. You didn't think you were going to be a financial, to help people with their financial goals with Clearwater Capital at first. You didn't think you were going to, leave corporate America, but you did. And you did it to help people, steward their money is what I'm hearing you say it, so that they could be the best for this generation and for future. Talk to us about your role with Clearwater Capital and what you do.
So Clearwater Capital, we've got a team of 29, including our outside board members and the entire team. Most of the team is located here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, in our office in Hoffman Estates. We have team members, though, also in Indianapolis as well as Kansas City. We serve families in 38 United States in the United States, and we also have family in Western Europe that we serve. The firm has grown organically from day one when John Chapman founded it to where we're at today, where we manage approximately $1.5 billion of assets under management directly and advise on multiples of that when it comes to total wealth. We come alongside families in three different ways. In three different, I'd say, broad categories. What I head up specifically is as the managing partner of our family office services. When we look at family office clientele, really we're looking at the ultra high net worth community. So for us, call that broadly $30 to $300 million net asset families in terms of where they're at, what they're trying to navigate, and how they think about the multiple dynamics. Estate planning strategies, the investment component of it, maybe there's businesses involved, philanthropy, how they're giving back. All of these pieces come together in terms of the broad-based services within that family office space. We have private wealth, so individuals that may not have that 30 to 300 million, but are great people that are trying to do the right thing, and also wanting a firm that is not conflicted, meaning we don't sell products, we don't represent anybody else other than our clients. What that means, though, is we could be independent, objective, sit on the same side of the table as the families that we're serving, and doing it as a registered investment advisory firm. We are independent in that way. And then we can bring in best practices from other service providers as may be needed, right? We're meaning attorneys, right? Well, we have individuals that are attorneys, but they're not practicing law for our clients. But how clients think about the integration of their estate planning and their financial planning and investment management. Yet we tap into estate planning attorneys all across the country to serve those specific family needs. There's a bit of I want to call it a virtual aspect of it. We operate as the family's chief financial officer, but then we're bringing in experts in areas that we may be needed, or we bring our team's focus directly to the families. So you've got that with people within the ultra high net worth community. They just have a bit more complexity that has to be navigated. Doesn't minimize somebody that doesn't fit that category,
Sure.
and that's where our private wealth business comes in. That are people that are below that $30 million of net assets that are trying to do the right thing. The third aspect of the business then is what we call institutional services. A lot of our business owner clients have got companies. A lot of those companies then they need benefits for their employees, how they think about 401k plans and profit sharing and a pension plan, cash balance plans, non-qualified plans for key employees. You get into a whole world that takes specialized expertise, just like an estate planning attorney. There's specialized expertise then that we leverage as a team. So we operate as a team. We're not just a bunch of individuals doing different things in the office. Mm-hmm. We operate as one business to come alongside of a family. We have centers of excellence inside of our business, and then we tap into other individuals in terms of what they're providing. I'll keep using the estate planning attorneys as centers of excellence in their own right. Yeah. We have clients that are selling their companies. We tap into those. So as we're bringing all these pieces together in Clearwater Capital, as we evolve as a firm, it's very different than when I started there. And I never thought that I would.
You all are builders and dreamers. At least that's what I see from the outside. And after hearing a couple podcasts with you and the founder John Chapman, I have burned the boats like in my head.
Right.
Yes,
right.
From an entrepreneurial spirit type.
And not going back, right? I mean, so when we said done with the corporate world, John Chapman's we have very parallel tracks, right? His was just a few years before mine when he founded the firm. But it's very parallel tracks in that mindset of saying, we did the corporate thing, great experiences, great learnings. We know how to do this, and yet we want to do it on our terms. So how are we going to continue to grow this for the benefit of the families that we're serving? Why I wanted to be a client of his, right? And why we wanted to turn around then and continue to grow that for the families that we do engage. And we don't want to be all things to all people.
Yeah, you guys care. That's what I from the outside in, that's what I see from everybody. The word thoughtful comes to it. And that's with whether it's a podcast or whether that's how you set a cup of water at a table to a guest that you're interviewing, that's maybe a client of yours. There's a thoughtful approach to what you do. And not every business has that. Definitely not every financial institution has that in your line of work. Some of them are very cookie cutter, right? We're not going to say any of their names, but I feel like you just focus in on the personal touches in such a way that I think makes people feel good, which that's actually kind of goes back to what you said before, is to, being good to people and caring for what is right with people, with having that soft heart. But talk to us about your style. When you work with somebody, what's your style? I think it probably is not going to be a surprise to some of our listeners as they heard some of the other stuff. But what's John Sleeting's style?
Oh, goodness. You probably need to talk to somebody else to figure out what my style is, right? So, and one of the things I just want to follow up on that you just said. Because back when I was with GE, and at one point I was out at the executive training center, and Jeff Immelt was the CEO at that point in time, and so we just ended up in this conversation. And there's something that he said that also stuck with me. It's like to be a great company, you have to be a good company, and it's like you could be, and it takes a moment, right? And that's even like in this moment right now. It's like to pause for a second, and for listeners to even think about that, right? If you want to be great, you got to be good, right? And that gets a little bit of that hard head and soft heart, right? If you're going to be known. There's no greater compliment that you could give, our team at Clearwater Capital than you just did, right? That the intentionality, that we care, right? That's what's coming across. We need to do the technical work really, really well, right? Because that has to be done. We need to deliver that with excellence. And to be known as going, yeah, you're a great company technically because you're good at the human level, you're good with people in that way. And I'm not talking about soft skills and you're good with, but the fact that the team cares.
It's real.
Right.
That's because you could act that way, but you could see right through that. You know?
And that's why we hire and we look at the team as character and competency.
Frankly,
we also look at the clients. Mm-hmm. We've had some individuals come in with what I'll call pretty big checkbooks, right? Mm-hmm. But the way that they were talking about their family, the way that they were engaging in the conversation, the way that it was playing itself out, it didn't matter how big their checkbook was. Mm-hmm. We want to give the best of our hours of our day where we do care. And if someone's going to approach their own family with some of the commentary, we step back and be like, yeah, that's not a fit for us. We don't want that. We want somebody that's really trying to look at all the success that they may have realized, the totality of what they've accumulated. How do the universal piece of not screwing up their kids or their family in terms of what they're doing, making an impact, making a difference in the world around them that they're striving towards, that's what matters. Yeah. So what does it mean to work with me, John Sleeting? You're going to get all of it. That might be a lot. I don't know, right? But that's the thought process, and it starts with a blank sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. There is no prescribed, right? We said we don't represent a product. I guess the product is the service, right? Is that conversation saying we'll bring our expertise and the expertise of all of our team members to bear on what that family is trying to solve. And when I say that family, it really is about that family. Because if you're not trying to screw up the kids, what are you doing about next generation education?
It's
somebody passes prematurely. How does that get fulfilled? How do you end up with individuals being on the same page? And everyone is different. We know every family member is different and unique, and that's true for all of our clients too.
Yeah, I'm a lot earlier in the journey, the entrepreneurial journey than you, but what I've learned is that for when it's hard, obviously, but that it's about working with people that you both want each other to win. Because there's a relationship piece there, right?
Yeah.
You're rooting for each other in some way. And when you say that, I kind of think of that as you don't want to work with somebody that doesn't want to make sure their kids are set up or that doesn't want to do, just wants to focus in on other things, doesn't want to give back. Like that's not going to fill your bucket either, right? But if you're helping a family that has wealth to be able to give back and to do charitable things, like you're helping make an impact in the world just by being the connector, right?
Right. So, well, even our relationship, right? I mean, think, if we go back, that you mentioned, we just recorded our 26th episode.
It's beautiful.
It'll be posted on February 1st. We started out with 6 episods. I think that was the agreement. It's like, okay, let's start out with 6 episodes.
We had our fingers
crossed. And see what happened, right? We all had our fingers crossed. Right back to who'd have thunk that I'd have been doing what I'm continuing on and how we communicate the stories that we do through our podcast and now have 26. We started out with 6. And you were probably rooting for us to be like, make sure this goes well because you want to do more. And so your team was putting in a lot of excellent work for us so that it was as easy as possible, right? That it was playing itself out, that it was getting communicated in the way we had hoped for. And we were doing our work. And we're also rooting for you going, wow, we hope you're successful with this because we want to see you succeed so that we can continue to leverage the expertise that you have and bring it together. And frankly, that's how economies work, right? I mean, and if you're giving your best to one another, it is that, win-win. I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's absolutely it. I'm rooting for you. You're rooting for me. And if we do this and we each do our part well, everyone wins.
Yeah, your show had, whether you knew it or not, had an impact on us. Like, we built that studio now. It's almost been 3 years ago. And if you looked at the strength-based leadership stuff, one of my top skills is futuristic. One of the downsides of that is sometimes I'm too soon. And with the studio, you were one of I think you were the second group of people that came in there. And the gratitude we had, I think, just first and foremost, for the connection that Katie made and thought like, okay, this would be a good fit. And to get you in the studio, to hear your first show, with John Chapman it was like, wow, higher level thinkers doing this. And I always envision this like, yeah, it's for businesses and nonprofits, but it's for thought leaders. And that what I've learned is that's businesses, nonprofits, and just people that are maybe trying to get out. But to me, you have to kind of want to talk. You want to curate a message to be able to do this. So I've seen non-thought leaders do it, and I've seen thought leaders do it. The ones that are winning with it, or the ones that have a thought leader mentality. But that show was super impactful for me. And the one you did with Terrence, and I'm forgetting his last name, but
Terrence
it was episode
Wallace.
3. Terrence was like, oh my gosh. I was so happy that like you all were in here. I was like, this is exactly why we're doing it, to build a space that thought leaders could come in and like bring good into the world through their own stories and bringing other stories out. So it's been a really awesome experience, and I have tons of gratitude that you're still doing it. Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies. It's been an evolution.
Yeah.
Like
it
really has. The new branding is mwah.
Thanks, Haley.
For a person who does that. Thank you, Haley. It is just really on point, and it not that the last one was bad by any means, but I feel like this just really you guys came up. It looks really good. The colors that you brought in together, the logos, all of it. But it's a special show because you're interviewing entrepreneurs and you're hearing their journey, and entrepreneurship is hard. It is not for every soul that is out there.
Unfortunately, I think the world looks at a little bit of the output, probably in our, in the social media world, right? People always put their best foot forward and put that out there, and that's what people tend to see, but they don't see all of the work, it's right? And grinding over years that takes place for individuals to get to that point. And it's one day at a time. It's just one day at a time as you go through it. So the stories for individuals. The other one that sticks out in my mind as you talk about storytelling is Trish Oslin that I had as a guest. And she's got her agency in the city, Redmark. But Trisha's insight to me when it comes to the storytelling is we're living a story. Yes. We're all living a story.
Yes.
Right? And so what do we want our story to be? And then in that story, she was going through the different parts and the different characters. And she talked about, the challenge and the guide and the heroes. And again, I do encourage, if anyone wants to go take a listen to that, to Trish's episode on our podcast, because it was so impactful to me to think about. Because her point was most organizations, most businesses put themselves in as the hero. They want to be the hero.
Yes.
And frankly, I think that's true for nonprofits too, right? They want to be the hero in some ways of showing up and making a difference in the world, which is great to do, right? The mission, the vision of what that is. However, the role isn't to be the hero for people. The role is to be a guide, to guide people so that they can become the hero in their story to fulfill whatever it is that they believe that their life is supposed to do, right?
So back to helping people win, right?
Helping people win. Yeah. So it's like, so you're guiding us through the process, right? You're stepping back, your team with our podcast and going, I don't know how to do this, right? I'm not a podcaster. Technically turning on the computer is hard enough for me, right? How do I do all of the work that you all have? And yet you guide us through that process so that we could be successful in doing what? And then turning around and guiding the families on their journey when it comes to this wealth management topic. And if we all play that role as guides, instead of trying to be and position ourselves to be heroes for people, I think all businesses would be more effective in how they're delivering whatever it is that they're working on.
I agree. Our team hears me say similar things, and it goes back to we just want people to win, and we got your back. You just get here, right? You're here, right? We'll help you even put it in a format if you need to, but let your voice be heard. We want to do the heavy lifting because it's to make our world a stronger place. It's gonna take all of us telling our own stories from our own perspectives in different ways to be able to share that. We have a lot of commonalities as humans, and that through those commonalities, you probably could learn from each other and save some pain overall, right? Why did when you look back 18, 19 months, whenever you started that show, what was your why behind wanting to start it?
So I ended up in a breakfast conversation with several individuals, and again, given the focus and the families where my the time and attention gets spent within the ultra high net worth community. And I know there's individuals that are like, okay, well, people with that level of wealth, this is easy for them to say. That life is easy for them, right? So it's sometimes the first world problems are first, these are high class problems
Sure.
to have. But in certain cases, those individuals actually can become more isolated. I've sat with families where it's like, we used to live in one house, and when we, did this with the business, we moved to the other house. The kids that were friends with our kids in the one place all of a sudden wouldn't be friends with them anymore because they moved to a different zip code, right? And when they moved to the different zip code, in the bigger house, so to speak, people that didn't pay them the time of day all of a sudden paid attention. And these are the kids, right? So when you think as a parent, how do you play that out over time? So we ended up in this dialogue, and a lot of people in the ultra high net worth community, although they may have their clubs and their friend groups and everything that they're doing, it can actually be a more isolating place because everyone wants something from them, whether it be in the work, charities that want something from them, them being skeptical of everyone wanting to come to them, right? What's the old saying about why did somebody rob the bank? It's because that's where the money is, right? Why do people then come and try and maybe extract something in some way, not legally, but they're not wanting something for those people. They're wanting something from those people. It can become isolating. How are these people coming together in conversation to learn from one another, to talk, to process? How do I not screw up the kids with what we're doing? How are you handling X, Y, or Z technically? And so there was a piece for me where there was one organization that was exploring this concept of how do they maybe put something more programmatic or structured behind that. I'm like, okay, that's your organization, and I wish you well, and I could be a resource to you when they were asking questions. But I step back and say, well, what am I doing, right? Where am I practicing what I preach, right? Because I do think this is important for this community of individuals. And so that's when I actually went back and said, yeah, we need, how do we, and this is where you capture, right? How do you amplify your voice? How do we then take these stories that I get a glimpse into that are very personal and very intimate and very, detail-oriented and not compromising or overstepping with any confidentiality and discretion with the families, but for them to share their story, because their story to be captured. And we've had guests come back and be like, wow, I shared the episode that we recorded, and I had family members come back in tears because they didn't realize that about our own family. I've had guests come back and be like, wow, I didn't realize that about my own story. You mentioned Terrence, right? Joe Pringle. There's others that came back and like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that way before in my own family. And even just sitting down in our podcast episode that we recorded, they saw it differently. And if they're seeing it differently, there's something to be learned from one another if we slow down and take the time to have a conversation in order to learn from one another. Back to my point about travel, and whether the travel is global or it's local, it's getting outside of your comfort zone. It's slowing down to ask the question and hear somebody else's story and perspective. And that's that's the why behind why we started the Entrepreneurial Legacy series.
It's beautiful. Stories matter.
Yeah.
That's it. And everybody's got a story. And if we understand, if we just took the time to listen to people's stories, I think we can learn a lot. Whether that's ultra wealthy people, or whether that's
It's everybody.
Somebody that lives in a poor community, whatever it is. If you understand their story, you can pull that perspective out of them, and it could help. It goes back to we're all kind of in a story. We're all playing our own part.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's better for me. I like being the guide of pulling out the stories. I love being curious. It's fun to be like, well, how did he get there? And what did that happen? And all those types of things. And because I think curiosity can help, because sometimes those people don't even know that they did those things.
Right.
You're just going. So when another person sees it from the outside, there's some meaning there. I feel like, at least that's my experience from it. But I agree with you that stories for sure matter. Did you always have a love for the story, or did that happen through this process? Like, talk to me about that.
Yeah. Even in preparation coming in today, you asked me that question, and I never thought about that. Strangely enough, I believe it's really important, right? I believe it's important, and I guess I would have never framed it as the love for this story. But it's the intrigue, it's the learning, it's the curiosity. To your point, it's like when you meet, it's like, how did you get here, right? How did this play itself out? And again, it doesn't just mean about like the financial amount, just because that's what I do on a daily basis, but it's everyone's story, and everyone does have a story, no matter where they're at. Back to the human and intellectual capital. Life played out for people, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes really difficult and challenging and hard, and that's not to be minimized. But there's still a story, and there's still humanity behind that story to be sought out. That's what we can't just be walking by. And so, is it a love for the story? Is it trying to slow down? And listen, this is where I'm back to my practice. What I really do enjoy that, and yet at the same time, because of some of my personality, drivenness, whatever you want to call it, I'm the first one that's at risk of not taking advantage or missing the opportunities to slow down and have a conversation, right? The militaristic side of me comes out and it's like, well, no, here's the time where we're at, right? You're
Step 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. If you're on time, you're late, right? You're supposed to be here 15 minutes ago. So those aspects of my drivenness, again, I say that and not pridefully, it's just like that becomes my blind spot that I have to be paying attention to make sure that I'm slowing down and tapping the brakes and looking for those opportunities to have a conversation, even if it's a brief one, to have a conversation and see people. We all want to be, seen and known, and that's important, and we've got to slow down to do that.
It definitely is. It's I'm seeing your servant leadership come in again, because that's that. It's a lot. It's getting to know people, understanding people's stories, slowing down for a minute to really take it in, right? That doesn't come easily for some, and it's something that, from what I've learned, it has to be very intentional in order to be able to. You have to have a lot of self-awareness, because business mind does come on. All right, I get that, but 1, 2, 3, can we execute, please? Like, I love you. Come on, let's go. But
let's get this done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we stop and hear the story, we understand it, then we can help. Lead with a caring heart to get back to that business side. Or to me, I hear that your podcast, and I'm like, man, if I was, was it $30 million or $300 million to get to be able to work with you in that. And I watched that show, and I didn't know if I was going to be you or another guy. I would be like, that guy cares. That would be the biggest piece for me. So I feel like it goes back to like your overall your brand messaging is just very thoughtful, very caring, and really intentional about like, let's make sure people are taken care of. Let's hear their story. Let them get that message across, because it's important, and that also allows you to do your job better at the end of the day, because you get kind of how they tick, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I love you've used intentionality a couple times, right? And people being intentional. Nothing just happens. You can't just sit back and expect whatever it is that you want to achieve in life to just happen. Where's the intentionality? Where's the plan? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? You can't wake up at the end of the year being like, well, how'd that year go, right? Well, what were you intentional about doing? Back to that allocation of, well, what are you learning intellectually? How are you allocating your time? What are you taking off of your calendar to make sure you're putting the things on that are the best? Forgo good in order to have best.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, that's the intentionality. It's true in business. It's true in your family. It's true with your kids. It's true with interactions. It's just true across the board. You have to bring intentionality. The question for everyone is, what do you want to be intentional about? And to me, that's this entrepreneurial legacies. It's not about the business side. It's also about the legacies, the impact component of it.
It's the human side too. It's very much that.
Yeah, right. Because it's the impact you're having on other people and what you're doing.
You kind of dive it into here, and we'll jump to the next thing in a minute. Have you ever heard of the book called Humans of New York?
No.
It's a photography book, and there's a couple different versions of it. And I hear certain podcasters, and I think of myself too of like why I love podcasting. Mine goes into like the story of the person, but what you said about stopping to hear somebody's story. I think that's so important, especially nowadays when not everybody fits into a box and into an algorithm. We have human stories behind us, but to understand that, at the end of the day, we all have a story, and that getting our story out there in an authentic way with no judgment is really important. But this book is pictures of just people in New York. And you see people from people that work on Wall Street to people that are homeless, and you see everybody in between. And then there's like one or two sentences about what that person's going through. And it's like, oh my gosh. So to slow down, to gain, perspective, to see, to ask questions. I think that's like, yes, in podcasting, it's for sure a great thing, but just in general, be thoughtful of that other human that's a part of you. They're doing the best they can too, at the end of the day.
Right.
Giving back is a part of it. You look at your LinkedIn page. I stalked it as we got ready for this. Obviously, you come from a place of philanthropy. You've mentioned that a few times already in our conversation, and giving back is important for you. You sit on the board of a couple, was it Cox Family Holdings, and also My Well Ministry, correct? Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about two things? One, why it's important to give back, but then just what you do within those roles and what those organizations are.
Yeah, and using those two as an interesting juxtaposition against one another. On one hand, for Cox Family Holdings, I chair the board. So this is a corporate board. It is for for-profit businesses and operations and entities and all the work that comes behind that. In that case, the family said that they wanted to step back, be on the board, but not necessarily chair it, right? And how do you run the corporate? So the business governance of what we do. So when we talk about estate planning, there's ownership that comes in. So when we talk about beneficiaries and trusts and all of that work gets into ownership, then governance gets reflected, and governance gets reflected in like, how does it actually run, right? How do you have this board and decision makers and hiring and firing, and all of that comes into play regarding a corporate board. And that's Cox Family Holdings. So that's part of the kind of work that I find myself in on a day-to-day basis. For another family, and this goes back to the Pizzafaro story that we touched upon with John and Stacy, which is they had a credit card processing business. And they also looked at that and said, okay, well, we've got this credit card for-profit company, and we also want to utilize that for the benefit of church and parachurch and ministry organizations for their credit card processing. And we can save them money.
And
save
more
them,
money goes to the church.
And money goes to the church or the ministry or the and so some of it was starting out being like, we could save a lot more money in those entities by taking their credit card processing down to cost. So here's my cost. I got a big company. I can leverage my cost structure. I can bring that cost way down. That leaves more money into the entity. They funded it personally in terms of the creation, the technology, everything that it is that created this My Well ministry. And what it is.
Mark to leave in the world, but yeah.
and they put a lot of money into it. And to date, and when I say to date, this number's out of date, and I'd have to get an updated number. It's in excess of $50 million that's been saved back into various ministry charitable organizations just by reducing their credit card fees. $50 million, over $50 million that's come into play that they've done. So strategic philanthropy, strategic giving, and I mentioned earlier, right, they're so generous in who they are, but they're also so strategic. So you talk about giving and giving being done well. They poured a lot of money into it, but multiples and multiples of that money coming back in excess of $50 million now that's been saved. They could have written checks to these charities, or they could say, no, I'm going to leverage strategically what I know really well, my technical competency, right? My human and intellectual capital. I'm going to leverage that, and actually we're going to create multiples of what I could just write a check for back into saving money. So strategic, so thoughtful.
That's beautiful.
And so that's why I sit on the board of that organization too.
That's beautiful. It's having a hard head for business and a soft heart for people.
Absolutely,
right,
isn't it? Right? There's no better picture of it.
You're fueling the church in a way that is 100% a win-win, and it doesn't impact your bottom line as much either. I would think too, and I don't even know the specifics of that, but you're saving the money on fees.
It is right. And I get so excited about these things, as you know too, right? Because it's like the income tax, estate tax, how that plays in, the savings that can come back for the family in being able to do these things and do it really well. Compliance will make sure that I say, none of this is a recommendation for anybody, right, or advice in these conversations, because it does play out at that individual family level.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, what does that family want to achieve? What do they want to do? How do they think about it? And how does that get freed up to make a difference in the world regarding whatever that means back to those individuals' belief system?
Yeah, beautiful. I think that's so important. You touched maybe a little bit on this, but and by no means am I asking you for advice as as a wealth manager right now. But what are some best practices for people like just starting, whether they're millionaires or whether they're just starting? What are some best practices when it comes to giving back? They're not, they're not sitting on the board yet or anything like that. But what are some direct steps that you think for them to take, both fiscally and if there's anything else that you have found to help people win?
In terms of giving back charitably.
Yeah.
Some of that comes back, I think, to people's beliefs. There's only three places money goes, right? And you've heard me say this probably so many times, right? It goes to your family, it goes to charities, or it goes to taxes, right? Those are the only three places money goes. For your family, that means using it, consuming it, inheritance, enjoying it, buying dinner, going to a movie, whatever it might be. Giving to a charitable organization you can do, and it's incented by the tax code because it can be tax deductible, both income tax as well as those that have estate tax challenges. A lot of people in Illinois actually have the Illinois death tax on top of estate tax, but we'll leave that for a separate episode for people to make sure that they're understanding how that works. But if you can take out taxes, if we can redirect taxes, so one is just kind of making that. What do you look at as your allocation across those buckets? I look at involuntary philanthropists. Involuntary philanthropists let taxes be what they are, and the government can decide how it gets allocated. Voluntary philanthropists step in and say, well, no, I can redirect giving in another way to reduce taxes, and I can be more directive if here's where I want to make an impact in my community or around the world, whatever that means for them. But the place to start is start. If you're not giving anything right now, I do believe that there's a joy in giving.
Yes.
I believe there's a joy in stepping back and saying, I can make a difference in someone else's life that, you know what, they can never pay back. This isn't a loan. They can never pay back. And whatever that means, that you can make a difference and help fund that, don't worry about, the family that's got their name on the side of the hospital building, right? Or whatever it may be that, donated the wing or what. Yeah, there's people that do that and good for them.
Compete with them, yeah.
But your question focused on how do you even get started in this? In being able to just have a mindset of abundance versus scarcity. And when we talk about what our purpose statement is, our purpose statement for Clearwater Capital is not about build the biggest pile of wealth, right, and minimize taxes and have all these legal documents. It's so that we can inspire and empower our clients to live with joy, confidence, and a spirit of abundance. Because if you have joy, spirit, confidence, and a spirit of abundance in the way that you're living that out, it does not minimize the technical, heavy work of the intellectual capital. But if you're living in that way and you're living with a spirit of abundance versus scarcity, and you're giving back, and you have the confidence and the joyfulness of being able to make a difference for someone else and walking up. And who knows? Maybe it's giving somebody a cup of coffee. You bought you saw somebody walk in, and you know what? You need to buy them a cup of coffee when they walk into the coffee shop. Maybe do that. That's giving back, right? And people are probably not going to look at you. Although I've had this with the police, right? You have to give to the entire police department. You can't just give to one officer in the coffee shop. But to give back in that way, have a mindset of abundance, not scarcity. Yeah. And the more that you can sow seed in that way, right? As someday somebody will probably be helping you out if you're in need, and you just don't know how that plays out. But you're also not worried about that because of the mindset.
Yeah, I can tell you're spot on. If you give, it comes back to you some way or another, and there is joy in giving and helping, even if it's a little bit, to be able to give to help somebody. If we all just did a little bit, we could make a better tomorrow, within our local communities for sure. Right. As we get ready to near the end, I'm going to kind of throw a few questions at you before our call to action. You've worked with many entrepreneurs and business leaders. What's one lesson you've learned, or if there's few, from them that has helped change the way you do business?
I think one, there's so many items, right? There's so many from the episodes that I all do, right? I learn, I get a front row seat from a lot of phenomenal families that inspire me, encourage me, that I learn from just in dialogue. So I'd say make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are challenging you, that are teaching you, that you're educating you. Don't be the proverbial smartest person when you walk into a room, right?
Leave if you are, right?
Leave if you are, right? Go into go into another room, or be intentional about giving back, right?
Yes.
If you're there, and that could be true,
Great.
that you're giving back to the generosity, and it's because it's not just financial capital. Are you giving of your time? Are you volunteering? Are you giving of the talent, right? That intellectual capital piece. Are you giving that back in ways? So if you are in the room that way, what are you giving back? And if you're in a room where you're not the smartest person in the room, how are you looking around and learning and surrounding yourself with people that are challenging you?
Yeah.
Could be my kids saying, "Dad, too far," right? Back it up here a little bit. But having friend groups, having people that are holding you accountable, so that you could be the person you say you want to be, even though you don't act that out. So surrounding yourself, the people that you keep company with, is really important to do.
There's a saying, like, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, and I've seen that throughout my life, and it's for sure true. So like it's about leveling up so that you can and giving back. There's a little bit of both, but it's don't allow fear to stop you, right? It's more of like, oh, I could do this. This might take time, that type of thing. But I'm around people that have been there, that have, or at least understand in some way, that helps for sure.
And Jason, there's a little bit of in there. That's where I think people confuse sometimes what we share and say. Because when you talk about that, it's like, well, then I got to keep upgrading my friend group, right, to get to the 5. That's not what we're saying at all. Right? It's making sure that you're surrounding individuals that are developing that hard head for the business side of it, and what it is that you're trying to achieve, the intentionality you're bringing, that you're surrounding yourself and putting yourself in situations, scenarios, learning that are making you better that way, and that never forgetting where you came from.
Yeah, I look at back that up. I look at a story I had over this last year of like, I need to work on these things. I know self-reflecting as a business and as a businessman, as an operator, I need to work on these things. And I'm like, I'm not getting those things. So then where can I get those things?
Yeah.
So then it's finding the connections. I still have my community. I still have my family. I still have all those things. It's more of like, I see a weakness, and I think this person could really help me in a really easy way, and maybe I could help them in another way too, and through that we could build a friendship. It goes really far with that type of mentality, so that you're not limiting yourself. I think is the best way to be able to say it, but you're not leaving people behind. To your point, as you look to the future with your team at Clearwater Capital, what has you most excited?
I mean, it may sound kind of funny. We're coming up on 20 years of since our founding,
awesome.
And yet, John Chapman, our CEO, our board, our operating committee, when we all get together, and there's also this aspect of like, oh my gosh, we're just getting started, right? And we're not, given the centers of excellence we have, given the go-to-market, if you want to use it as that, with these different client segments, how we've built the infrastructure, how we've built the virtual network across the country on a wide range of services that can come into play. So the infrastructure that's been put in place, we feel great about, like looking backwards.
Awesome.
And we're also never satisfied.
Of course.
And so they're looking forward with just great anticipation of what may come. And not for the sake of growth for growth's sake, right? I mean, you do have to run the business. Firm believer, if you don't understand how to read your financials, you got to read your financials. You got to understand the inputs. You got to understand how that plays itself out. But really for the life change that comes. There was an article that was written, Harvard Business Review, probably about 10 years ago. Bain Consulting, Eric Almquist was the lead author. He passed away last year. But in this, it was going through the elements of value. What value are you really delivering? What do people really want as value they're getting out of any service, any business? And at the lowest end, you need the basics. You need the fundamentals. Your ability to do whatever it is that you're doing. But as you move off that, I guess picture, if you don't read the article, go back and just picture the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And at that self-actualization. But we look at it like just below that tier, and it really is for people to have life-changing value in what they get delivered to them, that they can have the life that they want, that they can have the legacy that they want to result Because every day you're making those decisions to live life, enjoy it with intentionality.
Yes.
And in the process, you're also writing your legacy. That's the story, that's the output of all of our lives one day, right? When our time here on earth is up, then what is that legacy you're leaving behind? What is the impact on the world? And you can't just hope that happens, but you have to be intentional about that too. And if we can
every day
grow,
to do it, right?
Right? And you have to, every day you got to wake up and go, yeah, here's what I'm going to be intentional about. Cancel that meeting, add these 2 other meetings, because that's going to be more productive towards the life that I want to live and the impact that I want to leave behind. So in that way, that life change that's playing out through the families that we're serving, that's our leverage point, right? Yeah. That becomes our ability to go and say, if we can have that kind of an impact on the people we're serving, they're going to go off and change the world. And whatever it is, the work that is before them, that's what's so exciting. That's what's energizing. That's what's motivating. And that's what I'm looking forward to, the phenomenal team that we have at Clearwater.
Yeah, you guys are doing some pretty cool things. Again, it's cool to see from the outside in. To see how you go and lead from like a place of go back to thoughtfulness, but they go back to like character and competency, or having the values of having a hard head for business but a soft heart for people. I think those are just great values to live by, but especially build a business by and a brand by, because to me, that's what people want, many people want is that type of service, that type of thoughtfulness with the craft that serves their needs. Right. Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Last question, then we'll get to the call to action. I know this might be a surprise, but the world's a little bit of a hot mess. What's your words of wisdom to people here in our local community?
There's all kinds of news flow items, topics you could talk about, but then again, there always has been.
Yes.
Unfortunately, and analytically, the world has gotten more politicized as well, especially in the U.S. political system. Mm-hmm. And it's polarized, and you can see that in the data when we study it too. Yeah. I think that's terribly unfortunate. I mean, back to your point, we're all on this human journey together. We may see things very differently. We can talk about and debate policy, but every time policy spills over into personal attacks, minimization, the polarization of people, then we're not doing what we just talked about. Yeah. Sit down, have a conversation, understand the story, understand the perspective. Let's debate the policy aspect of it. But that's unfortunately what hasn't happened, and I'd say at the national level. Do believe in terms of having a view and understanding globally what's going on, because global does affect national. There's tragedies that take place all over the world, right? Mm-hmm. And wars that are happening. One of my daughters and her family lived in Rwanda for a year, right? And a lot of people, think about genocide. Yeah. Wasn't until my wife and I and our son traveled over to visit that we went to the genocide memorial. It's just horrific what people can do to other people, and it's happened throughout history.
Yeah. History repeats itself; it just looks different, right?
Right. Yeah. And so there's aspects of that of don't let that weigh on you. Don't let that burden you. There are challenges in the world, and there always have been challenges in the world. Turn off the news flow because it can be really just weighing on people in their approach, right, in their intentionality. Yeah. And then turn around and what difference can you make? And you can't solve the global problems. You can't solve the national problems. You can't solve the state problems. But if you can make a difference in one person's life, back to like what do you do, is take that step. Go find one person today that you're going to go make a difference in their life. Yeah. Buy that cup of coffee, right? Give them the $10, $100, whatever it is that might take the edge off for them. Open the door, hold the door for people, right? Common courtesy, right? You drive up and down the roads around here. It's crazy how much of a rush and this concept of road rage is not a concept, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's real. What's everybody in such a hurry for and so short-tempered about, right? So if you want to make a difference and you want the world to not be so out of control, then again, sounds cliche, right? And there's songs written about this stuff that are, be the change that you want to see in the world, but you got to be intentional about that.
Yeah.
and find those moments in your day.
And don't point to somebody else doing wrong when you're doing wrong too. There's something in Matthew about that that talks about that. It is a crazy time, and to me, I think about Love Local. Like, I can't believe I built this thing over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's been so we could love local and understand each other's stories. Because. Yeah. Life is hard, and this thing and how it works and how the algorithms work, it kind of repeats things, whether they're true or not, and that's coming from all sides of the table. So, put that down. To your point, find something that gives you peace. But, my thoughts is, go talk to people that are different than you, that are your neighbors. Yeah. Go out into the front yard. Forget the backyard for a little bit. We need to talk to each other. And to your point, you talk about home, it starts at home. Each of us, it starts at home. To make a better tomorrow, it starts at home. And sometimes we have to go through darkness to get to the light. But at the end of the day, if we all could do our own little part in our own little communities, that could be abundant when you look at that on a national or a global perspective. But it is a hard time right now. But I appreciate you sharing that those words of wisdom.
So if you think about the math behind that, right? If the 6 degrees of separation, right? If everyone knows a couple hundred people and how that has that ripple effect around the world, then there's 365 days this year. We're recording this still in January, right? If every day you made a difference for one person throughout the year, and you found that opportunity, and you connect with a couple hundred people during the year, and they have a positive impact that turns around and beats the positive impact. This gets portrayed in some commercials out there. I don't remember whatever the commercial's about, but you can kind of see how that pay it forward mentality. That can change the world.
The world could change with that mentality.
Absolutely.
If we all just not thought about ourselves first, but somebody else. Leave with more of that service-mindedness that we've talked about throughout this conversation.
Correct.
I totally agree, John. I appreciate you having the time to be able to sit down and have this conversation. It's been something that I wanted to do for a while, I could breathe. I'm glad I didn't faint or anything. So I was a little nervous when it all started. But if people are looking to connect with you, where can they connect with John Sleeting?
So 2 things come to mind, because a moment ago you talked about this call to action. If there is someone that's listening that wants to have a conversation with Clearwater Capital, a lot of people in the local community here especially, right, know Katie, given her accolades that she's received in the business community. But Katie Bragansky-Frank ends up being a little bit of a connection point for us as a broader team. If someone's got business challenges that they're looking at, how do I approach qualified, non-qualified plans on the institutional front? If families have got significant wealth, Katie's always a great place to connect with. I think just reaching out. Go to our website, which is for Clearwater Capital Partners. The website is ccpwealth.com. So CCP for Clearwater Capital Partners, Wealth, WEALTH.com. And they can find our contact information out there and shoot us an email and reference this conversation. And like I said, every relationship, every client that we serve starts with a virtual cup of coffee or a real cup of coffee and a dialogue and a blank sheet of paper and saying, what is it you're trying to achieve?
Get to know each other's stories.
How do we think through this? The other aspect, and I can't thank you and the team enough here, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is I don't see myself as a podcaster.
We're going to get you a shirt.
Sharing stories, though, and what you and your team, and you're skeptical of myself, being like, how's this going to work? How's this going to play itself out? Let's just start telling stories, and in that response from guests, from the guests' families, from other people that have listened to it, that have sent us an email or have talked to us about, wow, this was really impactful for me and helped me get energized and focused with what I'm doing. So the 2 parts on that, people are more than welcome. They can go find Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies. But if somebody else is listening and they're looking at, how do I amplify my voice? How do I get the word out? How do I carry on a conversation regarding whatever it is that they want to speak to? That they should be in contact with you and the team here. You mentioned earlier, right? If we're the second one and coming in, and we want this win-win for each other, I think it has been, right? Absolutely what we'd want in a relationship that way. So for other people that might be out there, and I'm the biggest skeptic, right? When you talk about hard head and return on investment and what makes sense, and are we doing this, and am I carving this time out of my day? What does that analytically look like when I put on my hard hat for business? It's exceeded that. And so I encourage anyone else that's trying to do that mental math to engage you, right, in terms of their projects and what they're doing too. So I wanted to share that as well. So thank you for all you're doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate those words. It means a lot. We're trying to build tools in the system to compete in today's new world with social media and YouTube, et cetera, to allow thought leaders in our local communities to do their thing.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you doing your thing and helping bring stories to life because we think it's important. So
Well,
keep going.
Thank you. No, my pleasure.
Yeah, keep going, and maybe they'll be around too. You never know. So, but thank you, John. Appreciate it, my friends. Thanks for listening. It's nice to be able to sit down with a thoughtful leader that puts other people at the forefront of what they do. We're not talking about small dollars and people who he helps. He helps a lot of big people and with lots of money, but yet there is a humbleness about him, and he truly cares. And he believes. I love the quote that he talks about: "Have a hard head for business, but a soft heart for people." Because imagine if we all just took that approach in life. I think it would be a little bit better. So, if you're looking for a financial firm and you heard what he said and it sounded that it could be interesting to you, check out Clearwater Capital. I don't vouch for everybody, my friends, but I'll vouch for their character and who they are as an organization. And they've been around almost 20 years, but knowing them and seeing them, they're just getting started. So I'm excited for that growth, and I'm grateful to have John on the show today. But see you on the next one. Support local, love local. We're stronger together, my friends. Peace. Thank you.